कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेकर उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट एलईटी के हैं, उनके जो घर हैं उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बॉम्ब ब्लास्ट किया गया।
मैं अब पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समरी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे, उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था, और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, सीआरपीएफ सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिलके इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे, जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ। आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूँगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब, सोनम वांगचुक ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पे रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
मतलब बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स, वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं। और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के एसेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300, लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं। एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनकी हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
सर, जेपी नड्डा ने कल जो है कहीं न कहीं नीट पेपर्स को जो है आधार बनाते हुए कहा है कि जम्मू कश्मीर में भी एक पेपर एक्चुअली का लीक हुआ था।
और एक नहीं कई सारे पेपर उस वक्त लीक हुए थे। उसकी इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई, मामला सीबीआई के पास है। कई सारे जो ब्लैक लिस्टेड कंपनियां हैं उन्हें रिक्रूटमेंट करने की इजाज़त दी गई थी, लेकिन उस इंक्वायरी का और इस इन्वेस्टिगेशन का क्या हुआ उसका जवाब मेरे पास है नहीं। आपको ये सवाल कहीं और करना होगा।
Sir, PM Modi has tweeted today that youth are important, but after so much has been done, after the protest, after the violence in Delhi,
तब कहीं ना कहीं तो इनके साथ बैठ के बात करनी ही होगी। आप इतने सारे नौजवानों को नज़रअंदाज नहीं कर सकते। मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं मरकज़ी हुकूमत ने जब कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी का पहला आंदोलन का प्रोग्राम था जंतर मंतर में, और उसमें चंद ही लोग आए थे, तो कुछ लोगों ने उसका मजाक बनाना शुरू किया था कि देखिए अब इनके साथ कोई नहीं है। लाखों लोग सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, लेकिन ये लोग सिर्फ सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, ज़मीन पे उतरने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। अब दिल्ली के हालात आपके सामने हैं। नई दिल्ली का एक अच्छा खासा हिस्सा जो है वो आज बंद पड़ा हुआ है। कल रात को भी जंतर मंतर के आसपास टीयर गैस का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ा। कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेके उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट एलईटी हैं उनके जो घर हैं उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बॉम्ब ब्लास्ट किया गया।
अब पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समररी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके और ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे। उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था, और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक तो हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, सीआरपीएफ सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिल के इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे। जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ, आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूंगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब सोनम वांगचू ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पर रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
मतलब बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स, वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के एसेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300 लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं। एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनकी हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
सर, जेपी नड्डा ने कल जो है कहीं न कहीं नीट पेपर्स को जो है आज़ाद बनाते हुए कहा था कि जम्मू कश्मीर में भी एक पेपर एसएससी का लीक हुआ था।
और एक नहीं कई सारे पेपर उस वक्त लीक हुए थे, उसकी इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई, मामला सीबीआई के पास है। कई सारे जो ब्लैक लिस्टेड कंपनियां हैं उन्हें रिक्रूटमेंट करने की इजाज़त दी गई थी, लेकिन उस इंक्वायरी का और इस इन्वेस्टिगेशन का क्या हुआ उसका जवाब मेरे पास है नहीं। आपको ये सवाल कहीं और करना होगा।
Sir, PM Modi has tweeted today that youth are important, but after so much has been done, after the protest, after the violence in Delhi.
अब कहीं ना कहीं तो इनके साथ बैठ के बात करनी ही होगी। आप इतने सारे नौजवानों को नज़रअंदाज नहीं कर सकते। मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं मरकज़ी हुकूमत ने जब कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी का पहला आंदोलन का प्रोग्राम था जंतर मंतर में, और उसमें चंद ही लोग आए थे, तो कुछ लोगों ने उसका मजाक बनाना शुरू किया था कि देखिए अब इनके साथ कोई नहीं है। लाखों लोग सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, लेकिन ये लोग सिर्फ सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, ज़मीन पे उतरने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। अब दिल्ली के हालात आपके सामने हैं। नई दिल्ली का एक अच्छा खासा हिस्सा जो है वो आज बंद पड़ा हुआ है। कल रात को भी जंतर मंतर के आसपास टीयर गैस का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ा। कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेकर उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट LET हैं उनके जो घर है उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बॉम्ब ब्लास्ट किया गया।
मैं पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ। लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समरी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके और ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे, उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था, और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक तो हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, CRPF सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिल के इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे। जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ, आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूंगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब, सोनम वांगचू ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पे रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
मतलब बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स, वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं। और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के असेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300, लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं। एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनको हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
सर, JP नड्डा ने कल जो है कहीं न कहीं नीट पेपर्स को जो है आज़ाद बनाते हुए कहा था कि जम्मू कश्मीर में भी एक पेपर असेंबली का लीक हुआ था।
और एक नहीं कई सारे पेपर उस वक्त लीक हुए थे उसकी इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई। मामला CBI के पास है। कई सारे जो ब्लैक लिस्टेड कंपनियां हैं उन्हें रिक्रूटमेंट करने की इजाज़त दी गई थी, लेकिन उस इंक्वायरी का और इस इन्वेस्टिगेशन का क्या हुआ उसका जवाब मेरे पास है नहीं। आपको ये सवाल कहीं और करना होगा।
Sir, PM Modi has tweeted today that youth are important, but after so much has been done, after the protests, after the violence in Delhi,
तब कहीं ना कहीं तो इनके साथ बैठ के बात करनी ही होगी। आप इतने सारे नौजवानों को नज़रअंदाज नहीं कर सकते। मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं मरकज़ी हुकूमत ने जब कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी का पहला आंदोलन का प्रोग्राम था जंतर मंतर में, और उसमें चंद ही लोग आए थे, तो कुछ लोगों ने उसका मजाक बनाना शुरू किया था कि देखिए अब इनके साथ कोई नहीं है। लाखों लोग सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, लेकिन ये लोग सिर्फ सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, ज़मीन पे उतरने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। अब दिल्ली के हालात आपके सामने हैं। नई दिल्ली का एक अच्छा खासा हिस्सा जो है वो आज बंद पड़ा हुआ है। कल रात को भी जंतर मंतर के आसपास टीयर गैस का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ा। कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेकर उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट LET के हैं उनके जो घर है उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बम ब्लास्ट किया गया।
मैं पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समररी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके और ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे, उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था, और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, CRPF सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिल के इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे, जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ। आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूँगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब, सोनम वांगचुक ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पे रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए। इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
मतलब बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
सब अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के असेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300 लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं, एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनकी हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
सर, जेपी नड्डा ने कल जो है कहीं न कहीं नीट पेपर्स को जो है आधार बनाते हुए कहा था कि जम्मू कश्मीर में भी एक पेपर असेंबली का लीक हुआ था
और एक नहीं कई सारे पेपर उस वक्त लीक हुए थे। उसकी इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई, मामला सीबीआई के पास है। कई सारे जो ब्लैक लिस्टेड कंपनियां हैं उन्हें रिक्रूटमेंट करने की इजाज़त दी गई थी, लेकिन उस इंक्वायरी का और उस इन्वेस्टिगेशन का क्या हुआ उसका जवाब मेरे पास है नहीं। आपको ये सवाल कहीं और करना होगा।
Sir, PM Modi has tweeted today that youth are important, but after so much has been done, after the protests, after the violence in Delhi.
तब कहीं ना कहीं तो इनके साथ बैठ के बात करनी ही होगी। आप इतने सारे नौजवानों को नज़रअंदाज नहीं कर सकते। मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं मरकज़ी हुकूमत ने जब कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी का पहला आंदोलन का प्रोग्राम था जंतर मंतर में, और उसमें चंद ही लोग आए थे, तो कुछ लोगों ने उसका मजाक बनाना शुरू किया था कि देखिए अब इनके साथ कोई नहीं है। लाखों लोग सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, लेकिन ये लोग सिर्फ सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, ज़मीन पे उतरने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। अब दिल्ली के हालात आपके सामने हैं। नई दिल्ली का एक अच्छा खासा हिस्सा जो है वो आज बंद पड़ा हुआ है। कल रात को भी जंतर मंतर के आसपास टीयर गैस का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ा। कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेके उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट एलईटी के हैं उनके जो घर हैं उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बम ब्लास्ट किया गया।
मैं अब पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समररी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे, उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक तो हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, CRPF सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिल के इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे। जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ, आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूँगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब, सोनम वांगचुक ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पर रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स, वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के असेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300, लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं। एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनको हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
सर, जेपी नड्डा ने कल जो है कहीं न कहीं नीट पेपर्स को जो है आधार बनाते हुए कहा है कि जम्मू कश्मीर में भी एक पेपर एसएससी का लीक हुआ था
और एक नहीं कई सारे पेपर उस वक्त लीक हुए थे। उसकी इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई, मामला CBI के पास है। कई सारे जो ब्लैक लिस्टेड कंपनियां हैं उन्हें रिक्रूटमेंट करने की इजाज़त दी गई थी, लेकिन उस इंक्वायरी का और उस इन्वेस्टिगेशन का क्या हुआ उसका जवाब मेरे पास है नहीं। आपको ये सवाल कहीं और करना होगा।
Sir, PM Modi has tweeted today that youth are important, but after so much has been done, after the protest, after the violence in Delhi.
अब कहीं ना कहीं तो इनके साथ बैठ के बात करनी ही होगी। आप इतने सारे नौजवानों को नज़रअंदाज नहीं कर सकते हो। मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं मरकज़ी हुकूमत ने जब कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी का पहला आंदोलन का प्रोग्राम था जंतर मंतर में, और उसमें चंद ही लोग आए थे, तो कुछ लोगों ने उसका मजाक बनाना शुरू किया था कि देखिए ना, अब इनके साथ कोई नहीं है, लाखों लोग सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, लेकिन ये लोग सिर्फ सोशल मीडिया पे हैं, ज़मीन पे उतरने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। अब दिल्ली के हालात आपके सामने हैं। नई दिल्ली का एक अच्छा खासा हिस्सा जो है वो आज बंद पड़ा हुआ है। कल रात को भी जंतर मंतर के आसपास टीयर गैस का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ा। कहीं ना कहीं नौजवानों में एक नाराज़गी है, जिस नाराज़गी को अभी तक नज़रअंदाज किया गया है। अब अच्छी बात है, वज़ीर आज़म साहब ने अपने पोस्ट के ज़रिए कहा है कि नौजवान जो हैं वो इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, और अच्छी बात होगी कि जो उनके कंसर्न्स हैं उन कंसर्न्स को लेकर उनसे बात की जाए।
सर, अनंतनाग में आज जो 2 टेररिस्ट एलईटी के हैं, उनके जो घर है उनको बुलडोज किया गया, बम ब्लास्ट किया गया।
मैं अब पुलिस की नाराज़गी को मैं समझता हूँ, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक आदेश है कि इस तरह समररी जो है एक्शन ये नहीं लिया जाना चाहिए। हमने ठीक इस तरह के हालात पहलगाम के हमले के बाद देखे, जब कुछ लोगों के घरों को जो है बुलडोज किया गया। मुझे उस वक्त मरकज़ की हुकूमत से बात करके ये सिलसिला रुकवाना पड़ा, और जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और इंक्वायरी हुई तो फिर पता चला कि एक भी लोकल उस हमले में इन्वॉल्व नहीं था। हमला करने वाले सब बाहर से आए हुए थे। तो यहाँ घरों को तोड़ फोड़ करना या हज़ारों की तादाद में गिरफ्तारियाँ करना, इससे हम हालात को बेहतर नहीं कर पाएंगे, उल्टा हालात जो हैं वो और ज़्यादा बिगड़ जाएंगे। मेरा अपना तजुर्बा, मैं भी 6 साल मैंने जम्मू कश्मीर रियासत को चलाया है। उस वक्त हम रियासत थे, पुलिस का कमांड हमारे हाथ में था, और हमने उस वक्त हम जानते थे कि लोगों को साथ लिए बिना इस सिलसिले का खात्मा नहीं होगा। एक हद तक तो हम ज़रूर पहुंचेंगे पुलिस, आर्मी, सीआरपीएफ सारों का इस्तेमाल करके, लेकिन इसका असली खात्मा तब होगा जब आम लोग हमारे साथ मिल के इसकी मुखालफत और इसके खिलाफ उठेंगे। जैसे पिछले साल पहलगाम के बाद हुआ, आम लोगों ने अपनी नाराज़गी का इजहार किया और पहलगाम के हमले के खिलाफ जो है अपनी आवाज़ बुलंद की। आज भी लोग नाराज़ हैं कि उस पुलिस के हेड कांस्टेबल को, आशिक को इस तरह बेरहमी से मारा गया। लेकिन जब 1000 नहीं, 2000 नहीं, 2500 के आसपास के आंकड़े आज सुनने को मिल रहे हैं, जब इतने लोग गिरफ्तार होना शुरू हो जाते हैं, तो कहीं ना कहीं फिर ये नाराज़गी इस सिलसिले के खिलाफ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होता है। तो मैं तो यही उम्मीद करूँगा कि हम इस लड़ाई में अपने लोगों को अपने साथ लेके चलें, तभी हमें इसमें असली कामयाबी मिलेगी।
उमर साहब, सोनम वांगचुक ने एक नई शर्त रखी है सेंटर के सामने कि एक ही शर्त पे वो अपनी हंगर स्ट्राइक जो है एंड करेंगे कि कोई रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन जो है इन प्रोटेस्टर्स पे ना हो।
वैसे भी बच्चों पे रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन होना भी नहीं चाहिए। ये तो मतलब एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे थे। अब चलिए, अगर सोनम वांगचुक साहब इस चीज़ को दोहरा के अपना हंगर स्ट्राइक वापस लेने के लिए तैयार है तो अच्छी बात है। मैं तो कहता हूँ रिटेलिएटरी एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, इन बच्चों से बात होनी चाहिए और जो इनके जायज़ डिमांड्स हैं उन पर अमल होना चाहिए।
बड़गाम गए थे, क्या सिचुएशन है?
अभी तो शुक्र है नदियों में नए स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी जो 2024 से लागू है, उस स्टार्टअप पॉलिसी के नतीजे में कई सारे नए यूनिट्स जो हैं स्टार्टअप्स वो जम्मू कश्मीर में कायम हुए हैं, और हमारी लगातार कोशिश है कि सीड कैपिटल स्कीम के तहत इंक्यूबेटर्स का इस्तेमाल करके और इस तरह के असेंट के जो है प्रोग्राम रख के जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना चाहते हैं, जिनके पास अच्छे इरादे हैं लेकिन उनको आगे लेने का जो है उसकी ताकत नहीं है, और बाहर से वो लोग जो इस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से जानते हैं, उनको हम एक साथ लाते हैं ऐसे प्रोग्रामों में। कोशिश तो यही है कि ये जो नंबर है अभी 1300 लगभग 1400 स्टार्टअप्स, ये हम हर साल जो है इसको डबल करें ताकि एक अच्छा खासा यहाँ स्टार्टअप्स का इकोसिस्टम और एक फाउंडेशन बेस जो है यहाँ कायम हो। अगर आप इस एग्जीबिशन में जाके देखें तो आपको एक आइडिया मिलेगा कि जो हमारे स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो मुख्तलिफ सेक्टर से ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं। एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर, एनर्जी यूजेज, बहुत से अच्छे आइडियाज़ हैं जिनको हम मदद करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
Reasonably good job. And of these nights demand shine, but not the overdone kind. The collection is sleek, flowy, and seriously stylish. Lightweight fabrics and intricate handwork. Every piece feels festive yet effortless. Whether it's soft metallics or bold shimmer, these are statement pieces you'll want to wear on repeat. So get ready to shine this season. Visit the nearest Swamit store and discover the Twilight Gala.
We still already start from TV Pakistan if you'd like to entertain my question also. The world is not stupid. We're not going to confuse anybody anymore. So I hope through your channel that message goes. I really don't see the basis for your question.
In your response, you said, quote, "It is hypocrisy."
I thought you were supposed to ask me a question. We still already start from TV Pakistan if you would like to entertain my question also. Okay. How about Kulbhushan, first of all, India and Pakistan have been accusing each other about terrorism. Hina Rabbani, as you said, yesterday, she brought out here. Could you come to the question? My question is, how long South Asia is going to see this terrorism and is disseminating from New Delhi, Kabul, and Pakistan? How long they are going to be at war, number one? And second, and how about the UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir? Does India abide by it or not?
You're asking the wrong minister when you say how long will we do this, because it is the ministers of Pakistan who will tell you how long Pakistan intends to practice terrorism. So look, at the end of the day, the world is not stupid, the world is not forgetful, and the world does increasingly call out countries and organizations and people who indulge in terrorism. And by taking that debate elsewhere, you're not going to hide it. You're not going to confuse anybody anymore. People have figured it out. So my advice is, please clean up your act. Please try to be a good neighbor. Please try and contribute to what the rest of the world is trying to do today, which is economic growth, progress, development. So I hope through your channel that message goes through.
India has extended the import of Russian oil. It is a totally opposite position of the European sanctions. Will you change your attitude during the G20 presidency?
First, we need to establish the facts very clearly. The European Union, between February 24th and 17th November, has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined. Just as I were to give you an India comparison, the oil import in European Union is like 6 times what India has imported. Gas is infinity times because we don't import, whereas European Union has imported $50 billion worth, 50 billion euros worth. Even coal imports from Russia by European Union, I'm not singling any particular country, is 50% more than India's import. So the remark that you made that, this is the way the European Union is going and this is the way India is going, I would very respectfully suggest maybe European Union is actually doing something very much more than India is doing it.
Mr. Borrell is not here today, not here now, but he was in the meeting, and he told the Financial Times before the meeting that the EU should be putting sanctions on refined oil products from India using Russian oil.
You're right, Mr. Borrell is not with us now, but I really don't see the basis for your question, because my understanding of the Council regulations is that if Russian crude is substantially transformed in a third country, then it's not treated as Russian anymore. I would urge you to look at Council Regulation 833/2014.
I actually want to follow up with something you said at an India Today event a while ago. You were asked about India's downgrading in Freedom House and VDEM and other democracy scores. And the journalist asked you, quote, how do you see this play itself out in terms of how India is being perceived by the world and these new reports? In your response, you said, quote, it is hypocrisy.
I thought you were supposed to ask me a question.
I am asking you a question. It is hypocrisy. We have the self-appointed custodians of the world who find it difficult to stomach that someone in India is not looking for their approval, is not willing to play the game they want to play. That doesn't actually answer the journalist's question. So I want to ask you again, are you concerned that perceived democratic backsliding in India is going to undermine its efforts to become a rising power in the world?
I think it answers the question if you would be objective enough to understand it. I think it says very clearly that the people who are writing these reports have a strong bias. Often they distort facts. Many of these reports are actually riddled with inaccuracy. So I put it to you, there's an ideological agenda out there. I don't know why that's hard to understand.
I just wanted to follow up, Minister, with a quick clarification. You're saying you have no evidence, this is related to the Canadian story, which I'm sure you're sick of speaking about. Have the Canadians, there's been reporting that there have been progressive visits from the Canadians to India, including in August. You're saying that you've never familiarized yourself with the documents that or no documents have been provided to you by the Canadians that purport to show evidence that Indian officials in Canada were aware of this attack. You have not seen these intercepted.
Are you saying the Canadians gave us documents?
I'm asking you if the Canadians gave you the intercepted documents.
No, look,
Indian diplomatic communication.
I have said that if somebody gives us specific or relevant information, we're prepared to look at it.
So you have not received those intercepted communications?
If I had, would I not be looking at it?
I'm asking you for a yes or no.
I think he's giving us the answer.
And the other question is
No, I'm not answering a second.
Oh.
Motivation 100 100%. Why does she remain 70%?
Lack of nutrients. Your daily diet gives you only up to 70% vitamins and minerals. For the rest, new Supridin Daily. It has 5 times zinc and 12 essential vitamins, meaning more energy and immunity.
One Supridin daily with food.
Minister Jaishankar, thank you very much. Day 2 of your trip to the CEE. It's been quite a ride since February for not just the region, not just Europe, not just the West, but it is now trickling in terms of effect of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine into the rest of the world, the East, the global South. Paint us a little bit of a picture of India and how India has been impacted. You've come out of COVID. You've had issues on the border with China. You've come out of the Quad with many, many diverse and divergent opinions, and an economy that is looking to make dramatic changes, but in very difficult and turbulent times. So if you can paint us a picture of where India is at right now, and then we will pick up the conversation from there.
Okay, let me go with exactly that flow. I think, yes, we are largely out of the COVID, though it never quite goes away. But we're out of the COVID also with a strong sense of economic recovery. I think there's a lot of optimism about rebuilding, and not just rebuilding, but actually leapfrogging in many areas, particularly digital. I think we handled it very prudently. I almost am tempted to say smartly, in terms of the financial responses, which was we didn't blow the bank in responding. We intervened where we had to, and very effectively. And at the moment, in a sense, the Modi government has just completed 8 years in office. And what we have done in those 8 years is really to, I would say, build almost, I would say, a social welfare society at a speed and a scale which the world hasn't seen. And in some ways, the COVID has actually hastened that. I mean, we are, for example, as an example, we are giving food support to 800 million people. And we've been doing this for more than 2 years. So that's like the population of the US and EU put together. We have a publicly supported house ownership program, which covers about 115 million beneficiaries, which is almost like building houses for Japan. Or even if you look at terms of, this campaign, this program actually to replace firewood with gas cooking, it's impacted 80 million people. That's like changing Germany's kitchen in the space of a few years. So there's a lot going on there, and why I mention that is many of the global developments today have the potential of actually putting that under stress. Your second reference was to China. Yes, we are going through a particularly difficult patch in our relationship with China. We've had differences in the past, but we've never had a situation where, after 1962, where really agreements on not bringing forces to the border have been disregarded. A very large number of forces have been brought to the border. We've had a clash. People have died. And this has not happened now. It happened 2 years ago. So, in a sense, it's a bit of a diversion, but it's also a useful reminder to Europe that there were other things happening in the rest of the world which sometimes Europe perhaps doesn't pay enough attention to. And there's also been Afghanistan, and what happened there, the circumstances in which the Western, particularly American military forces left finally. And now we have Ukraine, and coming into this region, it's a region which I know well. I have lived here in Budapest and in Prague. And it's a region which has been very helpful to us when we wanted to get
20,000 students out of Ukraine. Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, even Moldova. But I think it's also important for people in the region to realize how this is playing out in the rest of the world, that it is creating a huge fuel crisis, a food crisis, a fertilizer crisis, pushing inflation in low-income societies which don't have the margins really to absorb that. And so it can very quickly become political in many societies.
I think that brings up an interesting question that's come in from an online audience member, which is relevant to this, this point that you make about the rest of the world versus right here, right now in Europe or in the West. How interested are the Indian people in the war in Ukraine? Is it a major concern? Is it a minor concern? You've kind of alluded to the fact that it's affecting fuel, it's affecting food, but how interested is the populace itself?
I think it's a major concern. It's a major concern for two reasons. Look, today our existence is very connected. I mean, everybody sees things on the television, on their phones, on the net. So wherever you are, and because bear in mind today India is a very digital society. Even people at lower levels of income, the one thing they do have is the connectivity. So there is a lot of awareness. I don't think anybody, everybody is, to put it mildly, disturbed at the conflict. They see the pictures, they see that happening.
From getting your domain to creating your website, email and online security, we've got you covered. You don't need to be a tech expert. You just need a starting point. Your brand starts here with GoDaddy.
The name is Kamran Baksh. Why only Kashmir when we can have more?
अगर हमें नहीं पता चला कि ये लोग आगे क्या करने वाले हैं तो तू गया काम से। यहाँ कोई है जो वहाँ खबर पहुँचा रहा है।
But the other part of it is it has begun to impact people's daily lives. That it's impacting the petrol cost at the bank. It is impacting your wheat cost in your shopping. It will have impact for farmers to get along with sowing, and I think businesses when it impacts business. Because it is impacting business in multiple ways. There's a container problem, there's an insurance problem. You don't get certain commodities, or if you do, the prices are up. So it's disrupting life. And it's not a unique causal disruption. At the same time, I think some of the lockdowns in China are also having an economic impact. But when you disrupt the economy, it shows up in employment. So I think it does trouble people. Trouble people is a very
well, it's the job of a government. I understand it would trouble people. I think it troubles people in the West as well when cost of living crisis starts hitting. At some point, when you look at global supply chains, this is a very different world in 2022 that we operate in versus, say, in 1991 pre-liberalization, when India could afford to stand by non-alignment as it was defined then. I think a lot of critics would ask you the increase in your oil imports that have happened between 2021 and 2022, it's 9 times higher as of this month. You have been questioned in terms of that increased oil import from Russia, $95 a barrel for Russian oil, 119 approximately for Brent crude. Is that profiteering? Is that looking out for your own interest? What does that really mean for foreign policy in India? And how do you tie non-alignment with 9 times more oil imports out of Russia? How do you make the two meet?
Well, look, first of all, I don't see a non-alignment oil connection at all. Today Europe is buying oil. Europe is buying gas. I just read the new package of sanctions. Now, the package is designed in a way in which consideration has been given to the welfare of the population. So, pipelines have a certain carve out. And timelines have been given. It's not like tomorrow morning everything is going to be cut off. So, people need to understand, if you can be considerate of yourself, surely you can be considerate of other people. So if Europe says, look, we have to manage it in a way in which its impact on my economy is not traumatic, that freedom or that choice should exist for other people as well. Now, in terms of our oil purchases, we don't send people out there saying, go buy Russian oil. We send people out there saying, go buy oil. Now, you buy the best oil you can in the market. So I don't think I would attach a political messaging to that. I would also...
How do you not conflate the two? I mean, I know the Indian-Russian relationship is strong, but you also have issues with China. How do you then sit back and define Indian foreign policy at this point where the West seems to be quite vociferous in trying to curtail funding for the war in Ukraine, whereas by purchasing this oil for national interest, India is being asked, are you funding this war?
So, look, I mean, I don't want to sound argumentative, but then tell me if buying Russian gas is not funding the war? I mean, why is it's only Indian money and oil coming to India which funds, but it's not gas coming to Europe which funds? I mean, look, somewhere, let's be a little even-handed out here. And even this, look, the whole narrative that it's gone up 9 times. I mean, it's gone up 9 times from a very low base. And it was a very low base because at that time the markets were more open. Why if countries in Europe and the West and the United States are so concerned, why don't they allow Iranian oil to come into the market? Why don't they allow Venezuelan oil to come into the market? I mean, they've squeezed every other source of oil we have. And then say, okay, guys, you must not go into the market and get the best deal for your people. I don't think that's a very fair approach.
So talk to us about the second aspect that Indian foreign policy is being questioned at this point when it comes to wheat bans and food bans of exports. How does that then correlate? Because we're talking about the global south and the east that is being squeezed by Russia's issues with allowing Ukrainian grains to be exported. But by India doing the same, again, aren't those weakest people in the world being subjected to the same kind of issues from India? Do you see that as supporting Russia, or is it a completely different element that we don't understand in the West, that your perspective is different?
I think answer is B. You don't understand in the West. But it isn't just the West, okay? I don't think people understand because they're not actually tracking the trade. We have been exporting wheat, okay? Typically, we export about 2 to 3 million tons. Last financial year was a better year. We exported about 7 million tons. This year, before the heat wave hit us very badly, the expectation was that we would do substantial exports, and we were open. I mean, in fact, Prime Minister himself had said on various occasions, saying, look, we see that there's a food crisis in the world and we'd like to be of help. But what we then saw was a kind of run on our wheat, a large part of it done by international traders based out of Singapore and I think to some degree maybe Dubai. And the result was actually the low-income countries.
रोज रात एक मैच शुरू होता है, इंडिया वर्सेस पीसफुल स्लीप. कोई बार-बार पोजीशन बदले, कोई बैक पेन को कैच करे. लेकिन अब एक नया कोच आ चुका है, द स्लीप कंपनी. India's first and only smart grid mattress. They soft comfort, firm back support. ताकि इंडिया 4 या 6 नहीं 8 मारे. 8 hours of peaceful sleep every night. the sleep company. Many of whom were our traditional buyers, like our neighbors, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal. These are our traditional buyers. Okay. Interestingly, the Gulf buys regularly from us. I heard Dr. Tedros in the earlier session talk about Yemen. Yemen buys from us. Sudan buys from us. Okay. Now, what we saw was the low-income buyers were being squeezed out. The wheat was actually being stocked for being traded. So, in a way, our goodwill was being used for speculation. Mm-hmm. So we had to do something to stop that, because it was also impacting us at home. Our prices were going up. So I want to be very clear what we have done. We have actually said, look, we're not going to give speculators an open access to the Indian market, so that the Indian customer and the LDCs of the world get the short end of that. Yeah. What we are still open to doing is where we see a kind of a deserving country wanting wheat, very glad to supply it within the realm of possibility. And just for the record, I think we've done this year wheat exports to about 23 countries. The rate of export this year, if I were to take the same period as last year, my rough sense is it's about 4x. Okay. So actually, it's gone up, and I know in many cases, foreign ministers of some countries have called me up, and we have assured them that they would have access to our markets.
So this is all about stopping and curtailing speculation at the end of the day.
And preventing a diversion to high-income countries with a greater possibility to buy, because what we saw happen with the vaccines, we don't want to see happen with the wheat, which was the rich people got vaccinated and the poor were left to God.
Well, that brings up a question again from the audience now, and I would like to ask, I will come to you. I want to just do one question from the online audience, which kind of follows up on your point of diversions. This person's asking, according to the Wall Street Journal, India is becoming a key point for transshipment of Russian oil to bypass sanctions. How does that serve India's foreign policy interests?
I don't know. Does whoever wrote that knows what transshipment means? Well, I mean, transshipment is when you get it. No, when you get it and you sell it to somebody else. I have not even heard of anybody in India thinking along those lines. So, yes, we do buy Russia.
You're saying the Wall Street Journal report is inaccurate, that they're quoting?
Politely, yes.
Okay. So
I can say it less politely, but
not a conduit to any Russian oil transactions.
No, not at all. I mean, listen, please understand the oil markets. There's an enormous shortage of oil. There's a physical shortage of oil. Getting access to oil is difficult. I mean, a country like India would be crazy to get oil from somebody and sell it to somebody else. I mean, this is nonsense.
So that is your question answered, and the minister's on the record. Yes, please. If you could stand up, give us your name and a brief question.
Konstantin Agat, freelance journalist from Vilnius, Lithuania. Dr. Jashankar, with the Indian government essentially ignoring war crimes in Ukraine, not condemning Russia, not doing sanctions, you then expect... I'm totally sorry, I know what to do. With India counting on global support for in its struggle with China, its issues with China, how do you think you'll be trusted by others after that? Why do you think anyone will help Delhi after you didn't help others over Ukraine? Thank you.
You know, it's an interesting question which you might, I mean, not you, meaning you personally, but people might want to ask themselves, because if I were to take Europe collectively, which has been singularly silent on many things which were happening, for example, in Asia, you could ask, why would anybody in Asia trust Europe on anything at all? So here's the take. I don't think, I mean, first of all,
I think you're mischaracterizing our position, where they have, for example, when Bucha happened, we condemned Bucha, and we actually asked for an investigation into Bucha. In terms of what is happening with the Ukraine conflict, our position is very clearly that we favor an immediate cessation of hostilities. It's not that we've ignored it, unless you call phone calls to Putin and Zelensky as ignoring something. So first, I would urge you to get the factual position accurately. Secondly, in terms of the connection you are making, look, we have a difficult relationship with China. We're perfectly capable of managing it. It's if I get global understanding and support, obviously it is of help to me. But this idea that I do a transaction, that I come in one conflict because it will help me in conflict too, that's not how the world works. So a lot of our problems in China have nothing to do with Ukraine, have nothing to do with Russia. They predate it. And there are, if we are getting into who is silent on what issue at what point of time, I could point to a whole lot of issues on which, as I said, Europe has held its peace. So, it's a great polemical point you made. So I take it in that spirit.
I think as a follow-up to that, a lot of the noises I've been hearing, both in the United States and here in Europe, is on a similar train, that you have a problem with China on the border. It's been going on for decades now. It is getting worse. What position does that leave you in when it comes to seeking support if further incursions are done, further skirmishes happen at the border or within the border, to kind of echo what's happening in Ukraine in terms of sovereignty issues that are being raised?
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt you?
No, please do. But I want to come back to a question, the crux of the question, which I asked a few people in the political circles, in the financial circles. What's your big question? And one of the foremost geopolitical strategists on Wall Street sent me this question for you. Mm-hmm. And the question is simple. If and when the choice comes down to it, not today, not tomorrow, but in the future, and she strongly believes it will, for India, will it become, in terms of support, the US or China? And that will be kind of a defining moment that comes out of the situation that we face with Russia right now.
Look, number one, why I wanted to interrupt you in a way. I'm partly reacting to the previous observation. Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours. If it is me, it's ours. I think that's something, and I see, reflections of that. Again, in terms of, there is a linkage today which is being made. A linkage between China and India and what's happening in Ukraine. So come on, guys. China and India happened way before anything happened in Ukraine. So the Chinese don't need a precedent somewhere else in the world on how to, engage us or not engage us, or be difficult with us or not be difficult with us. So as I said, I just see this as frankly a not very clever argument, a very self-serving one. This idea that, your grand strategy must be about how you will choose. I will do what, as all of us do. I will weigh the situation, everybody, after all, how do countries eventually make decisions?
There will always be two axes at this point. I think it's an understood, accepted fact that you have the West, US-led, you have China as the next potential axis. Where does India fit into this picture? Are you planning to not?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it. I don't think it's necessary for me to join this axis or not, and if I'm not joining this, I must be with the other one. I don't accept that. I think I'm 1/5 of the world's population. I'm but today the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world. I mean, forget the history, civilization bit, everybody knows that. But I think I'm entitled to have my own side. I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choices. And my choices will not be cynical and transactional, but they will be a balance of my values and my interests. There is no country in the world which disregards its interests.
So, as a final question, because I know you have to go, and our time has been cut short
And
a little bit
the
by
coffee
your
break
staff.
is coming.
The coffee break is less important, but your staff is insisting you have meetings. As a final question, then, to leave us with this perspective, as you say, there's a whole part of the world that we are ignoring and the perspectives that we're ignoring. What will or what is India's position on the world stage? Because if you want to talk about 1/5 of the world's population, you cannot also sit on the fence when it comes to foreign policy matters. Non-alignment isn't plausible if you want to take your position on the world stage. What does it look like with 3 years of your government left, approximately? And what is
of this term? Of 2 years, actually.
Oh, 2 years.
Yes.
Thank you for the correction. Yes. Or even in the next decade or so. What is India's position? Sitting on the fence is not an option to be a world leader.
Look, I don't think we're sitting on the fence. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't make me sitting on the fence. It means I'm sitting on my ground. And my ground is actually, what are the big challenges of the world? Okay, big challenges of the world are climate change. I think I'm very critical to the solution. I can be an exemplar. I can be actually an arena for an enormous leapfrogging of green technologies. Look at terrorism. Look at the emergence of a world order. Look at security. Look at sustainable development goals. I mean, you take any and all of the big challenges of the world, some part of the answer either comes out of India, can be contributed to India. And again, I hate to say, it's a bit like a broken record, but look, a lot of things are happening outside Europe. We have, partly because of climate change, for a lot of humanitarian, natural disasters, humanitarian responses. In our part of the world today, a lot of people look to us to help out. The days when they expected Europe to come, which Europe did at the 2004 tsunami. The difference today is nobody's even thinking of that anymore. So the world is changing, new players are coming, new capabilities are coming, but a new agenda must come. The world cannot be that Eurocentric as it used to be in the past.
And who will India play with? Will it be Europe and the US, or will it be China and Russia?
Look, they're not exclusionary, but we are a democracy. We are a market economy. We are a pluralistic society. We have laws and contracts. We have positions on international law. So I think that should give you a fair part of the answer. After all, you began the question with a reference to the Quad. Even though we didn't get much time to talk about it, but the fact that you have today a grouping like the Quad, we just had its summit in Tokyo, where very important decisions were made on connectivity, on telecommunications, on supply chains, on cyber security, on maritime domain awareness. It should tell you something which direction we're going. So again, I urge you that don't use necessarily a caricature version of one situation as a yardstick to pass a sweeping judgment. Because even on Ukraine, do reflect on this point. Somewhere at some point, surely the conflict has to end. Somebody will have to, a set of people, it cannot be a single country, probably not, will have to engage the players. It is our collective interest to find some kind of resolution, unless you're throwing up your hands and say this is not fixable. So at that point, I think people will need us.
It says a diplomat, a career diplomat turned politician, then diplomacy, and keep going with it. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us, and thank you all for being part of this conversation.
So before we dive in, I just wanted to sort of take stock of where we are. A celebrity billionaire has become the voice of ordinary Americans. China proclaims to be the biggest democracy in the world. Russia has become the new role model for how to invade your neighbor. The German government has collapsed. The French government is in a permanent state of near collapse, which means that Italy is now officially the most stable democracy in Europe. Now, democracy is something that's on many people's mind. Many Europeans are worried about the state of democracy in America at the moment. J.D. Vance is very worried about the state of democracy in Europe, as we heard today. Something that's going on and that I hope we can touch on today is this fight over what makes a democracy a democracy. And I have a great lineup of people here today who have all been dealing with this issue in their various countries. I'd like to come to you first, Elissa, since the whole world is currently trying to make sense of the reality of Trump #2. You are a senator and you are a Democrat. So I guess I want to start by asking you whether our premise is fair. Is this a crisis of democracy or is this a crisis of the Democrats? Because Mr. Trump, of course, got a mandate, a clear mandate, and even turnout was up. So is democracy perhaps doing fine?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me and thanks for including me in the panel. I think, just by the sheer scope of instances and countries you just went through, I think it demonstrates that we have a crisis of democracy. I don't think it's just the United States, although certainly we do in the United States. I think it's something that's going on globally where people are not feeling the benefits of a democracy in the way that we were taught.
Same price में extra legroom वाली सीट मिलेगी?
मिलेगी, plus a complimentary meal and a lifetime free flying pass.
ये तो कैनरा बैंक वाली बात होगी, जिसके एक्सपायर अकाउंट के साथ मिले फ्री एयरपोर्ट लाउंज एक्सेस एंड कंसेशन ऑन एजुकेशन लोन जैसे सुपर रिवॉर्ड. तो कैनरा बैंक में अकाउंट मस्त है.
And while I am a Democrat, I also won on the same ballot just now in November with Donald Trump. My voters voted for Donald Trump and Elissa Slotkin on the same ballot. And there I can tell you the mandate was not about ignoring the Constitution or putting a broligarch in charge of the government. It was inflation was too high, prices were too high, and I'm going to vote for the person who says that they can lower those costs. So I think it's important not to conflate a mandate on lowering prices, which is yet to be seen, versus a mandate to do some of the things that are going on right now, which, constitute, I think, close to a constitutional crisis in the United States.
So it's very important to zero in on this difference. We often have these ideological swings, but you're saying this change of the guards is actually something much more fundamental. They are challenging constitutional democracy itself. How confident are you that in 4 years' time, those checks and balances will have survived?
Well, I think we're in the middle of this first 100 days of President Trump, and he is absolutely pushing the boundaries of our Constitution, and in some cases rolling right over them. Our courts have been involved. Obviously, the legislature is involved, and it's yet to be seen how he reacts. Does he get pushed back and we're now back in the boundaries, or does he just keep going, rifling over those? So I think it's yet to be seen. But I think what is important, again, from the place I come from, not every single person is sitting around their table talking about the ideological shifts in constitutional democracies. They're looking at the price of food, the price of gas. They can't get a new home, and they feel that very acutely. So, you can't pay your rent with democracy. So while people may not be thinking about it every single day, that doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility to have conversations like this, but it's just a reminder that we need to have the conversations outside of our capitals and bring home these ideas to people's pocketbooks and their kids. Because at the end of the day, at least in the United States, that is how people vote.
And I actually want to come to that point in a more sort of in a deeper way and actually have a bigger conversation about the sort of what we can do and what in particular center-left parties can do, because my sense from reporting in countries like Germany, the UK, and France, people feel almost betrayed more by the center-left than the center-right, because center-left parties always said that they would have their back. But I want to go first to you, Rafał. You are the mayor of Warsaw. You're also running for president in your country. And Poland has been here before. You have had 2 terms of democratic backsliding and illiberal democracy. It would be interesting to know what your advice would be as the US is entering this phase now. What would you recommend how to safeguard checks and balances at this point?
Well, I'm not going to be so presumptuous as to give advice to anyone, but I can tell you that, yeah, we've been there. And when it started in Poland, the democratic backsliding 9 years ago when the conservative populists won, lots of my friends in the US and in Western Europe thought that this is just a Polish-Hungarian problem. And I was telling them this is a problem with democracy. You know, there's no longer a differentiation between the right and the left. You know, it's a question of rising polarization. It's a question of social media. The algorithms work the way they work, which means that they actually emphasize conflict. And of course, it's time of multiple crises with which we have to deal, and the time of parties which are anti-establishment, which are winning everywhere. So we need to deal with that. And of course, Poland is a good case because we proved to be very resilient. And at the end of the day, the Democrats won. We still have one more election to go because we need to win the presidential elections to sort of close the cycle and entrench democracy in Poland. But we've won. Why? Because we have a very strong civil society. We had very strong non-governmental organizations, and we were very smart in the 90s when we've regained full independence after the communist rule, because we really devolved power. So there's a lot of power in the hands of the local governments. And it so happens that populists do not really win, regional elections that easily. So most of the power in the cities and in the regions was in the hands of the Democrats, which staunchly defended our principles. And also because, those crises made us very careful and resilient. And at least there was an agreement, even with the populists. We were on the same page when it came to security, when it came to strengthening our defense capabilities and so on and so forth. So there was this thread of understanding, which of course was so crucial in the moment of crisis and when Russia invaded Ukraine.
I mean, after these 2 terms, when a lot of rollback happened, when particularly in the media and in the judiciary, what would you say, how easy it is to come back from that? Because that is the other concern, of course, and it's important perhaps to educate American voters and others about, these are institutions that took a long time to build. And we're seeing a lot of potential damage being done in the first few weeks already. So I guess the question to you is, how are you doing in reversing some of the damage that was done in those 2 terms? And how easy is it actually to repair institutions?
I mean, the real problem is that, populists sometimes do not have any qualms about breaking the Constitution. So if someone is breaking the Constitution, what do? I mean, we do have our checks and balances, and some of them held pretty strongly in Poland, right? But I mean, the populists were simply breaking the Constitution. So now our problem is that we are doing it, but it's difficult to revert some of the things that they were doing because our president holds the right of veto, and we want to do it by the book. We want to introduce bills which are going to introduce changes back to where we were for example, when it comes to the independence of the judiciary and so on and so forth. It is difficult, but we're doing it. I mean, the important thing is that the dualism, if someone breaks the Constitution and, for example, nominates new judges, breaking all the rules, or nominates cronies for the Constitutional Court in Poland who were not even judges, I mean, to reverse that is very difficult, and it's of course terrible for democracy. It's terrible for the rule of law, for economy, and so on and so forth. So we've proposed a way out to the president, but he was not ready to accept it. So we are slowly reverting to the rule of law, and we reverted in many cases, but in order to entrench that, we need to win the presidential elections.
है भी बड़ी अजीब डकैती है। माल नहीं लुटिया, रू लुट ली, ना कोई चीख चहाड़ा, ना कोई मरिया, बस सब देखते रह गए। ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਜੋਕਰ ਤਖਤ ਤੇ ਬੈਠਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਰਾਜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦਾ, ਉਹ ਪੂਰੇ ਰਾਜ ਨੂੰ ਸਰਕਸ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੂਰਜ ਡੁੱਬਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੇਰੀਆਂ ਅੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਨਿਕਲੂਗਾ ਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਤੇ तेरी पुलिस हाथ भी नहीं ला पाएगी। डकैत तो साढ़े सारे दे अंदर होता है, मौका मिलता है जो हाथ लगता है और लुट लेंदा है। लाउड स्पीकर का इंतजाम। ओए सरेंडर करना ही बोल।
Well, and that's where you come in. If you don't, which is a possibility, would that just mean that in the judiciary, that would just become a fact of life? You wouldn't be able to do anything about that constitutionally? You wouldn't be able to reverse those?
Well, unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, that would mean that we would have, sort of like, two dual states with two types of judges and so on, which is untenable for democracy. And fortunately, as I said, local democracy, the media's, held strong. I mean, Poland is a completely different case than Hungary because we devolved power, because our society held strong. Even, I always give this comparison. Warsaw's budget is $7 billion a year. Budapest is just $1 billion. And they just, are fully reliant on subsidies from government. So it shows you that the devolution of power, so for example, we when the government cut spending to non-governmental organizations, to free culture, independent culture, and so on, we started financing it. So we were much stronger because we made smart decisions 35 years ago. But it's, of course, the onslaught of populism. It's, we've never tested it before. So, I mean, there's one thing when you're trying to stretch the limits of democracy, stretch the limits of the Constitution. It's something completely different when the populists just break all the rules. Because, how are you going to make sure it doesn't happen again? It's just a question of investing in education. In investing, like, kids need to know that they have to verify the data that they see. So this is really, I mean, something different. It's not just meddling with the Constitution or with the law. It's investing in public opinion, education, and so on and so forth. Non-governmental organizations, local government. That's the only hope for fighting populism in the long-term strategy.
It's a long-term strategy. And Stora, I would like to come to you now because Scandinavia, you're part of the world. I mean, you're the Prime Minister of Norway. one of those countries that we all look to and think, wow, they're rich, they have great welfare states, they've sort of got something right. So, in some ways, it is a haven of social democracy, it long has been, but even in your patch of the world, the far-right parties are gaining, anti-immigrant parties are gaining ground, but as somebody who stands for a party that is on the center-left, tell us a little bit what that message is that the left needs to stand for. How can the left, which is globally in crisis, I think is fair to say, and has been losing the trust and the votes of its traditional constituency, working class people, which partly is because that term has lost meaning somewhat in today's economy, but what is it that the left needs to understand about today's politics in order to be attractive again?
Well, it's a big question. I'll try to come at it from a few angles here. First of all, I think all societies and all political systems are under tremendous pressure from technology, from what the Munich conference has identified as the main challenge in today's world, pretty similar to what the World Economic Forum did, putting on number one misinformation, fake news. And all of that coming at us at the core of democracy, which I think is a huge challenge, especially when political parties take a grab at that approach to politics to really manipulate facts. So that is pressure on the social fabric, so to say.
Although just to jump in there, I mean, J.D. Vance, I thought, had a point today when he said that kind of interference only really works when there's at least some basis to the grievance and the problems that misinformation hits into, right? I mean, there are some underlying issues.
Absolutely. So that's what I want to come to, and where I believe that the left, the social democracy that I represent, really, we have the elements to put together the answer. But I think the senator pointed at this. You don't eat democracy for breakfast. It is not democracy that fixes your children when they don't succeed at school. So this is about the real reality of what your daily life is. If you go through, as we do as a political party in cooperation with sister parties in our part of the world, the number one theme on people's concern this last year has been cost of living and purchase power going down. And until you fix that and give security to that, everything else becomes a bit irrelevant. And you become vulnerable to misinformation, to quick fix, which does not necessarily reflect. So for me, I think what we've had over this last year with the inflation coming back, it's a cancer in the system functioning of democracies, speedily going up and rapidly coming down, it should be said, but it is destabilizing the social fabric of our countries. So for my government, it has been top priority to get inflation down, and in the meantime, have social policies that really are there to make welfare state work for those who really need it. So we have taken down the price of kindergartens, childcare. We have increased pensions for those with the lowest incomes throughout, and a lot of social spending on that side of the equation, so that people can see that we are working for their position, their dignity, their ability to manage their lives. When you get back stability, and we've been able to go through that inflation phase without increasing unemployment, but still in our country, which is a stable country, you can sense the instability that inflation is creating because cost of living is getting out of control. So that's where we have to get back. Then I think the second dimension for me here, if I may, is that, and I'm picking the example from Timothy Snyder's recent book on freedom. He was in Oslo and he was on a panel, I was on a panel with him, which is this balance between freedom to and freedom from. And if freedom only becomes a discussion of freedom from, we are not safeguarding democratic sustainability. There has also have to be freedom to. Freedom to take an education, freedom to get a decent job, freedom to be at work with decent work, not to be, put aside. And Schneider's example is from this Ukrainian village that had been deoccupied. Russians had pulled back. So the question is, are they free now? well, they are free from occupation, but they are not free to enjoy what you need to do to enjoy a decent life. So I think these issues about securing people's ability to live decent lives, combined with managing their daily economic outcome, safety of their children, investing in, sports, leisure, and activity for children, so they get, to be involved in community.
Office may noted, group chat पे ignored, family को हाँ जी, close friend story पे यूं, इतना brand क्यों जी रहे हो? Life में नमक स्वाद अनुसार नहीं, ज़ीरा मसाला डालो, जब तक सूरज चांद रहेगा, जब तक सूरज चांद रहेगा,
मोनाको खाओ, सदा salty रहो. That is part of where the center-left should be. And that's where we aim to be, and that's where we also aim to win elections, on that basis.
And I see this sort of fundamental dilemma in this argument, which I think makes a lot of sense. People do want security. They want public services that work. They want free and good, strong public education, all of which requires, man and woman power. And in Europe, increasingly, immigration, because, our populations are shrinking. And we're faced with this, on the one hand, voters who are very hostile, quite opposed to immigration, and at the same time they want welfare states that function, and they want growth. And both for functioning welfare states and for economic growth, you need some immigration. So how do we, as politicians, particularly on the left, sell that?
But I think, here's one issue I have with the Vice President's speech. I have a few, but this one, let's mention this one. He speaks as though we are not focused on immigration in Europe. I mean, this is the big theme in every country, that we want to have control of our borders, we want to have controlled immigration, and this is a key theme, I think, all across Europe. But then he makes the remark that there was a significant increase of immigrants, unvetted immigrants to Europe in recent years. Where did they come from? Ukraine. Look to Poland. 2 million or more Ukrainians have been accepted into Poland because there is a bloody war going on, which he did not mention, which I think is not really addressing reality, which is coming to Europe. But we have to, in Europe, country by country, but also as a community, to have a very thorough discussion about controlled immigration. And as you say, we cannot close Europe, because Europe's challenge in the future will probably be to have enough people to do the jobs we need to do.
And to pay taxes.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, I think that the fact that we have, in my country, we have 100,000 people for Ukraine now. If you take that per capita, it would mean in a German setting 2 or 3 million. In every municipality. So, how do you? This is a part of the solidarity that you have to mobilize spontaneously, and those Ukrainians coming, men, women, and children, they will turn up at some kindergarten, in some school, at some medical office, and there will be discussion, what are they doing here? Are they taking our places? But if you really explain why we do this in this very dire situation, it can also be understood. And I'm proud to see that, that has not unleashed, negative reactions in my country.
So Jonas, we'll come back to you in a bit, but I want to go to Jay now. There's one of my favorite stories about Mahatma Gandhi was when he traveled to Britain and somebody asked him, what do you think about Western civilization? And he said, I think it would be a good idea.
We're still waiting.
So let me paraphrase that slightly as we're having this discussion, this tortured discussion. What do you think about Western democracy?
Well, look, before I do that, because I think I appear to be an optimist in what is a relatively pessimistic panel, if not room. So I'll begin by sticking up my finger, and don't take it badly, it's the index finger. The mark you see on my nail is a mark of a person who's just voted. We just had an election in my state, just over. Last year, we had a national election. in Indian elections, roughly 2/3 of eligible voters vote. At the national election, electorate of about 900 million, about 700 million voted. We count the votes in a single day. Nobody disputes the result after it's announced. And if you look, and by the way, from the time we started voting in the modern era, 20% people more vote today than they did decades ago. So the first message that somehow democracy is in trouble globally, worldwide, I'm sorry, I have to differ with it. I mean, right now, we are living well, we are voting well, we are optimistic about the direction of our democracy, and for us, democracy is actually delivered. Senator, you said that, democracy doesn't put food on your table. Actually, in my part of the world, it does. Because it actually, today, because we are a democratic society, we give nutrition support, food support to 800 million people. And for whom that is a matter, of how healthy they are and how full their stomachs are. So the point I want to make is, look, different parts of the world are going through different conversations. Please do not assume that this is some kind of universal phenomenon. It is not. There are parts where it is working well. Maybe there are parts where it's not. And the parts which are not, I think people need to have an honest conversation about why it's not. I would argue that.
Bro, बॉल अंदर मत जाने देना, वापस नहीं मिलेगी.
अब चाहिए एनर्जी, प्रेडेटर एनर्जी, हर सिप में एनर्जी का जोर है. तभी तो गली गली में हो रहा है.
As to an extent, as someone dispassionately viewing it, which was your question, there are some problems. A lot of it is accumulated problem of the model of globalization that we've followed for the last 25, 30 years. I think a lot of chickens have come home to roost. Yes, there are issues, but from our perspective today, for us, democracy is delivered. We have a visibly less elitist society. We have one where the public has faith in the political process. Where actually every election, in a way, has been a kind of a verdict on the quality of governance. That, I told you we just voted and won, my party won that election. We were in the opposition earlier. We had a national election, my party won that election too, and we were incumbents. And we feel, if Prime Minister Modi got elected for the third time, the ruling party got elected, and to a large extent it is because of the delivery through democratic systems. So it is healthy, it is well, maybe not all over the world, but let's not make that universal.
No, I think that's a good point. And in fact, I was going to ask you a follow-up question here before I'm going to open it up to the floor, so do get your questions ready. Because we in the West, for lack of a better term, in Europe and the United States, I think we tend to sort of preoccupy ourselves with ourselves a lot, especially these days. And I think, all the middle powers that are, increasingly important, especially in our foreign policy, in the various conflicts that we're involved in, for better or for worse, I think they have their own views of what systems work and what don't. We used to assume in the West that our system is the one that everybody wants to adopt over time. So I guess the question to you, India, of course, being the largest democracy in the world, is your sense among your counterparts in, again, for lack of a better term, the global South, that democracy is still a system people aspire to, countries aspire to, or are there now powerful alternatives, such as the Chinese model, which may be more attractive to people?
Well, look, to an extent, all big countries are unique to an extent, but we would certainly hope, to the extent we think of democracy as a universal aspiration, ideally a reality, but at least an aspiration. It is in large part because India chose a democratic model after independence. And it chose a democratic model because we had fundamentally a consultative, pluralistic society. Now, there was a time, and I have to say this in all honesty, where West treated democracy as a Western characteristic and was busy encouraging non-democratic forces in the global South. It still does. I mean, in many cases, I can point to some very recent ones, where actually everything that you say you value at home, you don't practice abroad. So I do think the rest of the global South will view, the successes and the shortcomings and the responses of other countries. They will also ask themselves which ones of them they relate to. I would argue that in many ways, India, because it's historically been an open society, one very much linked with the world, many countries of the global South are more likely to say the Indian experience is more transposable to their societies than perhaps those of others. So I do think in our progress as a democracy, the fact that, for all the challenges that we've had, even at a low income, we have stayed true to the democratic model, which is almost, if you look at our part of the world, we're pretty much the only country that has done that. So I think it's something the West should look at, because if you do want democracy eventually to prevail, it's important the West also embraces successful models outside the West.
Are there any questions in the hall at the moment? Yes, the lady in the front.
Trudy Rubin, a columnist from the Philadelphia Inquirer. When Vice President Vance spoke today, he seemed to be arguing that democracy requires almost illiberal values. I would be curious to hear about how you all on the stage took his remarks. Did you see it as an outspoken attack on European democracy, a sort of declaration of war? And when you look at the United States now, as the foreign minister said, sometimes we used to assume that our model was the only one. But when you look at the US model now, does it have anything anymore to offer the rest of the world as a model?
Defined by precision, designed to flow. Introducing Hexelion showers. Thoughtfully designed, beautifully balanced, for the unique you. Dual flow, one seamless design. The same design language, now in your hands. Crafted to perfection. Your shower, your way. With a smooth shift of the knob, flow adapts to you. From precision rain streams to a calming massage flow. And when it's time to refresh your space, a powerful jet ready at your command. Hindware Hexelion showers, designed for Sukoon.
Do you want to take that?
Well, I can tell you just one thing, that we in Poland have an experience with different models, because, I grew up under communism. So, I don't have to be, and the society in Poland doesn't have to be really convinced about the merits of democracy, because we know what it means to live under an illiberal regime. Our problem is, and I think that this is the gist of our discussion, is that it is sometimes very difficult to explain to the people what democracy really means, because it's so abstract. And, when people use the word like, the judiciary, the rule of law, and so on and so forth, people are lost. As the Prime Minister was saying, people think about the economy, they think about the security, and so on and so forth. So it is the most difficult task for us is to explain that when someone is proposing an illiberal regime, that would actually mean taking our basic freedoms away from us. And I would submit to you that that's why we were successful in Poland, because we were able to tell the people that this is not just some abstract rule of law, but that by introducing a medieval anti-abortion law, the basic freedoms were taken from our women to decide their lives and to decide on their health. That by introducing indoctrination in schools, we were coming back to the communist system, where we would want to have a school which teaches us skills, not indoctrinates our children. That when populists, talk about national interest, somehow, quite often, they prove to be completely ineffective when it comes to influencing the outside world, because they cannot construct the winning coalitions that you need to be constructing in order to actually promote your interests. That if you want to really talk about migration, that you cannot simply allow populists to hijack that issue, because that can be dealt with by Democrats as well. And that we should be focusing on some of those most important concerns. And I think that our task today is not to sort of catch others, and sort of interpret the words, but to focus on what we can do in order to prove that we are better. We, on the democratic side, are actually better at resolving issues, and that we can be as effective or even more effective at providing security, at providing growth. This is the winning argument, and that's what we should be focusing on. Because if at the end of the day, ultimately, the question is whether my life was better under a different regime, then the only winning argument is that we can provide it, and we are not taking at the same time the people's basic freedoms away. So this is the argument, and I think that turning to us is always a good point in question, because we lived under both regimes, so we can tell the difference.
But just maybe to reinforce the sense, maybe to sharpen almost a little bit more what we just heard as a question is, was there anything in what J.D. Vance said about the shortcomings, supposedly, of European democracy that spoke to you? Was there something, for example, in this idea that we freeze out far-right parties in certain countries, in this country, for example, with the firewall? Are we afraid? Are we too afraid? Are we perhaps not? Are we more liberal than actually democratic sometimes?
Well, I think on that one, first of all, I think what is refreshing is that when we come together here, there is freedom of speech. And the vice president can decide that this is how he would like to address his audience. He likes to raise these themes. And although we may disagree, that is fair enough. I think, not addressing some of the key security issues that we face today is a missed opportunity. I don't agree with him that what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Russia, what's happening in China is less important than the presumed loss of freedom of speech in Europe. I disagree. The other element which I think is interesting here is that, coming from the US perspective, reading a parliamentary system in Europe, it is different. So this party is free to run in elections in Germany, but other parties are free to tell their voters whether they are, open to cooperate or not. This is part of parliamentarism. I run a minority government in Norway. I have to find solutions in parliament, and I seek solutions where I can have them with parties that share my platform. That is how that works. So I think, this was a kind of a simplified approach which I don't share. But what I do share is that constantly focusing on, accepting different views, accepting even outrageous views in our debate, accepting that people have faith and beliefs. He made points of that. I think that's what we should remind each other. He is here now speaking to Europe. If we were going to your country to speak about what we see in the US about, tech dominance, is there access to media for people? What's happening to our youth under control of social media? Is that, challenging freedoms and democracy? I think that's also a discussion to be had, but, not here.
Jay.
Can I make two quick comments here? One, look, I would challenge the equation of, liberalism in a kind of an international way with democracy. I do think different societies have their own cultures, their own values, their own ways of doing things. And the idea that there is some kind of universe, one truth and one judgment and one norm, and that should be preached, propagated, evaluated, and judged. I think that is one of the big issues we are having today in politics. And it is done by think tanks, it's done by people who do ratings, it is done by newspapers. So I think there is a reaction in many parts of the world to self-appointed custodians, people who've never fought an election, who are nothing to do with democracy, actually telling the rest of the world what is right and what is wrong in democracy. And I think it is, to me, inevitable that it will be challenged. My second issue, is, look, every country has its mainstream politics. It has its outliers, okay? If I were to look, for example, at how much Europeans, Westerners reach out to outliers in those societies. If I were to look at what do Western ambassadors do in India, if my ambassadors did a fraction of that, you would all be up in arms. So I think there are double standards here.
I think it's interesting, and I think, to your point, of course, within a parliamentary system, every party is fully in its right to refuse to cooperate with another party. The problem is that some of these formerly outlier parties are now the second biggest parties in our democracies, and their voters, perhaps rightly, resent the fact that they're being ostracized from government. And in this country, in Germany, and I'm German, I can say this, it goes so far as to cause a scandal when you're trying to pass a bill and you pass that bill with votes from that party. So it goes into a sphere that is very hard to explain to voters, right? I just want to give the audience another chance. There's another lady here, and then the gentleman. Maybe we have those two questions together, and then...
Thank you. Maggie Feldman-Pilch from the Wilson Center. Over the last day and a half, we've heard so much about this need to explain how democracy pays rent better. And Senator Slotkin, I don't know that anyone does that better than you. As you mentioned,